This tiny little $10 microcontroller and all the data that's on it is the only thing standing in the way of getting my flood-totaled Aston Martin up and running. Now, when I bought this car at a South Florida salvage auction for $28,000, I figured there was no way I could lose. This very limited production DBS had a relatively low waterline, and the dipstick only had oil on it. Its carbon fiber body was in perfect shape. The color-shifting paint was unbelievable in the sun, and according to its history report, it was a garage queen with really low miles. But after sinking countless hours and dollars into a solution, only one reasonable fix remains, and it will require someone smarter than your average car YouTuber, and a miracle.
That was the most insane thing I've done in recent memory.
Now, immediately after we got this car off of the delivery truck, we started pulling up all the lower interior panels to find our problem areas, and quickly found this junction box module that sits really low in the passenger side footwell, which was severely saltwater corroded. We pulled the module out, and I nearly threw it away because I figured there was no way this was good for anything. Little did I know this module would be the only way to get the car working again, and we'll come back to that in just a moment. The box had a Volvo sticker on it with a very clear part number. It turns out it's very common and used in the cheaper Volvos of this era, so it makes sense it's only suitable for six-figure Aston Martins. So for $50, I bought one of these things and was super confident it was going to be our major fix on this Aston. Like, I was almost as confident as I am in the Bucks winning their season opener this weekend. Like, so confident, I popped open my Underdog Fantasy app and I picked Baker Mayfield to get higher than 1.5 passing touchdowns and Chase McLaughlin to get over 1.5 field goals. The stuff that we know is going to convert. Plus, they got this Travis Kelce gimme pick, which you guys can get too. It's a no-brainer, and that rounds out my Underdog picks for the weekend. The NFL season is finally here, and with Underdog Fantasy, you can turn your picks into cash by going higher or lower on player stats. The more you pick, the more potential you have to win, up to 1,000 times your money. Underdog is available in over 30 states, including my great state of Florida, and my favorite part is that entries don't have to be limited to a single sport. If it's being played, you can find it here. And look out, on this Thursday, Underdog has their Thursday 30, where you can apply your profit boost token to any of the entries that you're choosing, and you're going to get a 30% profit boost. Hit the link in the description, sign up and deposit using code SAMCRACK. That's going to get you up to $1,000 in bonus cash, and you can claim that free Travis Kelce pick. All you got to do is hit that link in the description box and find it all over at Underdog Fantasy. So let's just do this. Let's take that replacement junction box. Let's get under here. Let's just hook it up. But first, we'll go ahead. We'll clean all these harnesses with a bit of contact cleaner. I also have this little pin right here, which has a little bit of sandpaper on the end of it. That'll act as like a little rasp for anything that's obviously corroded, needs cleaning, where a relay sits here and over here. With it all hooked up, if that gives us some electronic power to the car, along with a battery hooked up underneath the hood here, and it gives us that power we need to the seats, we'll be able to move these forward and then strip each interior component that was destroyed by the salt water. We'll be able to find whatever electronics might need some restoration or probably replacement, and that might just make this Aston Martin work again. All right, here we are all hooked up here. While I was cleaning and getting everything ready, I picked out, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4 different terminals here that got stuck in some of these wiring connectors from the old junction box. So that thing was trashed, but this is relatively clean, at least on the inside. And again, everything's hooked up. So let's go get a battery under the hood and see if this brings the car to life. All right, here we go. I'm really looking forward to see what happens here. I am semi-confident, but I've been a little too confident this entire time. That's the first time I've ever heard this car make any other noise but that one little motor sound we had. Now, keys in my pocket. Let me get the right key out. Let's see if we hit this. Lock. So no response to this. That's, oh, there we go. Went off. Oh. Hello. Don't worry. Key. Just see what happens when we do this. Yeah, my excitement there was pretty short-lived. Basically, the alarm would just keep going off as long as battery power was hooked up to the car. And while it seemed like we basically got nowhere, It was a tiny bit of progress, because it was your comments that let me know that this module that we just replaced wasn't just a junction box. Here's a typical fuse box or junction box. This is where a lot of your car's electronics run through, and they're all protected by a fuse. If something goes wrong, the fuse will blow and it will cut power to that module or to that accessory. And so on our Aston, I was figuring that because we had so much saltwater corrosion, we were probably experiencing a situation where it was like all of our fuses were pretty much dead. And that was probably the case, but I ended up learning that this is more than just a junction box. Volvo and Aston Martin actually call this the CEM, or the Central Electronics Module. It's basically a junction box with a computer built in. This thing is the brains of our car, and it's responsible for a lot of the interior electronics, and it's also responsible for the immobilizer system. It has the VIN number coded to it, and that VIN number is also matched via a lot of the other electronics in the car. Now, since the one that's currently installed in the Aston came out of an old Volvo, there's a security mismatch, and it's why our alarm won't stop going off. Since it seemed that our original module was toast, I found that the best solution forward was to get a brand new, never programmed module from Volvo, which cost around $700, and take it to the Aston Martin dealer for programming. I explained our situation to two different dealers. They both said that this would totally be possible and that it would be fine if I went and installed the module on my own to save any other labor charges. As long as it was brand new, they said they would flash it. Now, it took a month to get an appointment at the Aston Martin dealer, and when the day finally came, I had the car towed in. The entire story changed when they saw the car in person. Now, while I didn't stay with the car, I'm not quite sure what they even attempted. I don't know if they even tried flashing the module. However, they did provide me with this $40,000 quote. And if you break down this $40,000 repair estimate, it's bogus in a number of different ways. And I would tell you, if it was $40,000 to sort everything on the car, it would make sense being done at a dealer. But it's not. It's literally just to get my module program. Here's what they recommend. $17,757 in labor charges alone. If you divide that by 295, that's their per hour charge. That's 60 hours of labor. Then they have over $20,000 in parts, and that's just 3 parts. And they only have to install one of those parts, which is a wiring harness. There's no way I could find anywhere near 60 hours labor in this job. The other 2 parts they recommend are 2 transponders, which are basically key fobs. Now, if you search all these product descriptions online, you'll find them immediately. Both the key fobs together would cost about $2,000 retail, and this wiring harness would run about $10,000 retail. So that's $12,000 in parts if you just go online and order them, that they want $20,000. And I continue to use the word retail because this is a retail dealer. Their parts should be in line with the retail costs in line, but they've got an $8,000 markup on them. So with the dealer solution completely off the table, there was only one other straightforward-ish solution, and that was to have our original water-destroyed module cloned. It turns out that in Volvo cars, their heater cores leak directly above where the modules sit, so they get water damage pretty regularly. Probably not to the extent that ours is, but these parts are old and considered low tech at this point, and there's a bunch of services that can tap into the main board and take the data off of the module and simply clone them to a cheap used one. It's actually the cheapest and most efficient solution by far, but how would anyone be able to extract anything off of this? I spoke with 3 different services, and all of them were optimistic that they could get the data off, even with the corroded circuit board. So I picked the service that had the fastest turnaround time, shipped the module away for cloning, and crossed my fingers. But the service wasn't able to get the data off. At first, they said not to worry because if they can't tap into the board and get the data, they can tap into the prongs of this really tiny chip. And they needed my approval to do so since the heat applied to pull the chips off could cause additional damage. I figured it couldn't get much worse than it already was, and I asked if they've had success doing this in the past. They said yes, so I told them to go ahead and do it. And go figure, they still couldn't extract the data. At this point, it seems like we're at the end of the road, but through the power of all of you, you connected me with an extraordinarily talented automotive tech, a guy named Fadi Koka. Fadi is huge on TikTok and very well known for fixing everything, even the biggest basket cases, and recently he revived a flood-totaled Aston Martin Rapide. This car has an extremely similar layout to our DBS, and the way he did it was by cloning the module. We connected, and Fadi asked me to just send him over the module, so I did. The service that had attempted to clone it forwarded it direct to him, and what showed up up was the module, as we're all very familiar with at this point, and one of 2 microcontrollers removed from the board. Fadi first tapped into the board to try and extract the data off that chip, and it worked. Fadi made it sound like it was pretty easy. Now all we need is the data off the chip that was removed from the board, and we're in business. Now this time, instead of tapping into the board to pull off the data, Fadi had to actually connect a few wires to the pins that run off of this microchip. These pins are so fine, they're almost as thin as a human hair. So he soldered a couple wires to it, and no matter what he tried, he was unsuccessful in extracting this data. He swapped out interfaces, cables, and everything, and he told me that this chip itself had been shorted. And it all makes us wonder if the previous service was unable to get any of the data, and Fadi was able to get the data off of the chip that was still attached to the board. Was it the saltwater corrosion that shorted this chip, or was it the fact that they use heat in order to remove it? Either way, this is a dead end for us, and we'll never be able to get 100% of the information off in order to clone this module. And it would seem like this is pretty much the end of the road again. But if we go back to the dealership that was unwilling to flash this module for us, they could tell us that they were unable to flash it, but I personally don't believe it, and that's because I was able to communicate with our brand new unmodified Virgin module. Once that was installed in the car, my diagnostic tool was able to communicate with the module. This is the first time we were able to communicate with this module. And from all the different Aston Martin gurus I had connected with, the fact that we were able to communicate with it told us we should be able to flash it. The problem is you need the Aston Martin factory tool to be able to do this. It's called the AMDS, or the Aston Martin Diagnostic System. Now this tool primarily lives at the dealers, and you'll find them floating around in the wild. When you do, they're like really expensive, several $1,000s, but still, I felt that this amount was justifiable if it meant getting our DBS up and running, and that was the plan. So again, I had connected with all these different Aston Martin gurus, and they said once you get a hold of your AMDS, all you need to do is plug it into the car. It's going to generate the base set of files in order to flash your new module. You're going to need a couple key fobs to program them new to the car. You can buy them from Volvo. They're a few $100s each. But there's one last thing you need that needs to come from outside this diagnostic tool, and that is a CCF, or a car configuration file. Basically, your own individual Aston Martin's identity. This CCF is what contains the VIN, and the VIN is what's used to match all the modules together, and basically to defeat the immobilizer, to tell the car that everything here is legit, so you can go ahead and turn over and let the owner drive the car. This is where our new mission began, of where can I obtain this car configuration file from? And supposedly it lives in 2 places. One is that old dead waterlog module that's no good to us anymore, and the second is Aston Martin's headquarters in England. They keep a copy of this file and their systems for whenever somebody needs it in a dire situation like we're in. And the good news is they actually stock this file as a part number in their part system. So I started really simple and just called an Aston Martin dealer, gave them this part number, and said, hey, I want to order one of these. And when they looked it up in the system, they said, hey, this is a part that only the service department is allowed to order. It's not available to end users. And so that conversation stopped right there. And then a friend of mine connected me with a Aston Martin dealer service manager. I had a long discussion with him about the car, the problems, and that I needed this file in order to ever have any hope of starting it. He said it wouldn't be a problem. He put in the order for me, and he let me know when it came in. The problem is, a week later, when I followed up with him, it never showed up. 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, it was the same story. A month and 2 months later, he just never got any reply from Aston. So it kind of ended there. And our last hope was just to order it from an online parts distributor, which is what I did. I put the order and paid immediately. And overnight, I got an email back from them saying, hey, this is a part we can't sell you. This is pretty much where I threw the towel in, because if I can't get the car's configuration file, I'll never be able to start the car and have a, well, budget-minded project. Short of buying a whole nother Aston Martin and mashing 2 cars together, which doesn't make any financial sense at all, this thing would never live again, at least in my hands. And I've just seen it way too many times where people buy these flood cars, whether they're saltwater damage or not, where water gets up to the floorboard areas, takes out a module or 2, They clean these connectors, they replace these modules, and things work. In extreme cases, people will replace either parts or whole wiring harnesses, and I went out and bought all the different connectors in case we had a problem with these. But again, since my diagnostic tool was able to connect to this car's central electronics module, it told me it was ready to be flashed. We just needed the appropriate tool and files in order to do it, and I could never come up with them. Now, this was really disheartening to me because the car was such a great value at $28,000. These cars are easily $100,000, and they're super rare, so I think they'll appreciate in time. They're very unique. They're much different from their DB9 counterparts, even though they look similar. But I just want to tell you guys, we exhausted every available option. And I think it brings up one last really important point, and that's the Right to Repair Act and all the laws surrounding it. If I'm not allowed access to the one data file that supposedly, again, exists with Aston, they stock this file as a part number in their system to a car that I own via its title documents, like, what's wrong here? There are a lot of little parts that I've seen over the years that are called restricted items, items that are only available to specific places that order them. And how can you restrict these items unless maybe they're a danger to someone? I don't know. And I don't know if this item was specifically restricted to this car because it contained a salvage title. When that happens, they do get updated in the manufacturer systems. And they do this simply to like void warranties on newer cars and things like that. But still, it seems like totally out of reason that I wasn't able to get this file. So at this point, I was looking at the most beautiful paperweight ever, and I had to come to grips with selling it. I had it carted off to the local salvage auction where it brought in right around $28,000. I basically got cashed out on the car. I lost whatever money I spent on all the different modules I bought and any little parts here or there. It was a nominal loss. I feel pretty lucky to basically have broken even, but if you look at the amount of money and parts that this car contained for $28,000, it was easily there. So someone got a decent deal, and someone with really good connections, I do believe, could get this car up and running again. This is very much the reality of these projects. Sometimes they just don't work, or at least work out within reason. For a second, I considered buying a donor cart to make this work, but why waste money on 2 Aston Martins when I can sink what 3 of them would cost into a single Ferrari?